which of course is a 2-week training. I will, the same as yesterday, just give a few minutes for the colleagues who haven't joined to join. And at the same time, thank you for being punctual while we wait for everyone else. So we'll give it 2 minutes to see if we'll get a few more participants, and then we will begin. Um, may you please stop sharing your screen? There's someone who's sharing their screen. I think it's Moses. Thank you. Okay, so thank you once again for joining us, and welcome to the second training session of the week, which is our second last session, with our last session, of course, being tomorrow. As you'll recall, yesterday we went over the positive peace framework as an introductory phase. We also went through the Global Peace Index. We also went through the Ecological Threat Register and the Global Terrorism Index by the IEP, and looked at some of the statistics and position in which Nigeria features in those reports. And I think I promised yesterday to have a closer look at some of the indicators for Nigeria to show exactly where the changes happened in terms of the Global Peace Index. So if you take a look at my screen here, you will note that in terms of the baskets of indicators that we have, those three domains, Nigeria improved in terms of its ongoing conflicts. It also improved, as in got better in terms of its militarization. However, there was a slight decrease in terms of safety and security. And then if you look at the 23 specific indicators, you will see that perceptions of criminality, refugees and internally displaced persons, and the homicide rates all went down. And then in terms of militarization, the armed service personnel rates also deteriorated, and military expenditure also went up as a percentage of GDP. So those are the specific indicators where we saw changes. You'll see the ones in green highlighted there, where you had improvements. For example, the political terror scale, the terrorism impact, the police rates, and incarceration rates improved, neighboring countries' relations improved, deaths from internal conflict improved, and external conflict support improved, as well as weapons imports. You'll see the ones in orange are the ones where there was no change from last year to this year. So this is, as I said, the indicators of the Global Peace Index. I also committed yesterday to starting this session with a few outstanding questions from yesterday. So if there are any burning questions, I'll be able to take two, and then we can proceed with the second presentation, and then the question and answer session thereafter. Professor Onyeke Alphas, I see you have your hand up. Please go ahead and unmute, sir.
Yes. You hearing me?
Yes, I can, Professor.
All right. My concern was your presentation yesterday. I was worried about the coordinating relationship of your organization with the political leaders in Nigeria because of my conceptualization of every effort made by individuals or non-governmental organizations. Unless the leaders are involved, it will be a wasted effort. And secondly, the conceptualization of positive and negative peace worried me a little bit because some people were still mentioning the policing, the peacekeeping, and I don't think those are part of the concepts of positive peace. If you can elaborate, maybe I may be misunderstanding the difference. I don't think policing, militarization, and other forceful attitudes towards ensuring peace is positive peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much for both your questions. I think the first thing I'll say is to reiterate our position as the IEP, which is to be an independent think tank, to be a data-driven think tank. So when we produce these reports, as we've been doing for the past 15 years, and then the others which started later, we present the data to all stakeholders, whether it's a development bank, whether it's a CSO, whether it's a government, so that this data can be used as a tool to drive either policy or programs or services. So in terms of the observation that leaders need to be involved, that is very, very accurate. And I think we would be more than happy to engage the Nigerian government more directly to see if, for example, we could do a Nigeria peace index or an ecological threat report just for Nigeria. We could also go even deeper and say we do it per province or per district and really go into the specific factors that affect these national and sub-national units. So it's a very good observation, and it is definitely our desire to support the efforts of government, to support all the leadership and even NGOs and other partners to foster development. Your second question was in relation to negative and positive peace. And you are right that in terms of the indicators, things like policing and militarization are indicators in the negative piece, especially the domain relating to militarization and also the domain in relation to safety and security. However, it's important to also be aware that when they are involved or included in the positive peace framework, it's because they form an important part of, firstly, the structures and institutions. And also they form an important part of some of the pillars. For example, when we talk of a well-functioning government, one of the arms or ambits of a well-functioning government are things like the military, are things like the police, things like prison services, and so on and so forth. So in terms of building positive peace, they are an important part, because if you strengthen them, if you improve them, if you make them more efficient, if you make them less corrupt, for example, if you make them respect the rights of others, and so on and so forth, according to each of those pillars, you will see that they have a part to play, an important part to play in building positive peace. So I hope that that somewhat answers your question a little bit. And
Yes,
then the second question, I think Muhammad Sani, Yahaya, you had your hand up first, so please go ahead, sir.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so much delighted to be part of this great program. My question is on the class held yesterday that was held on the
Oh,
issue of.
sorry. So your audio is cutting in and out.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, Sabitri. Can you hear me? All right.
Okay, it's a bit better now.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm so much delighted to be part of this program, and my concern is about the project that we are about to take next 4 months. The issue is, in the northwest region of Nigeria, we are faced with bedeviling, kidnapping, in which we cannot access some communities that are within. So, is there any measures or any training or any special training that is being put in place that will enable us access those communities that are vulnerable to kidnapping and also terrorism that is taking place in that part? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. And it's a great question. I think we've had it in different forms, and it's important again to underline some of the elements of the answer. As the IEP, we are more than happy to come in with this positive peace training, with positive peace workshops, down to community level, and in engaging all of the stakeholders, whether they're from government, from the private sector, and all the other partners and stakeholders involved in building peace and facilitating development. So that's something we're interested in doing. It's a conversation we can keep having. And also at the same time, now that you are all in this training and will be certified IEP ambassadors, you are now in a position as well to initiate this training, to initiate these workshops, to initiate these dialogues and conversations, and even the projects as you move forward. So it's something that we hope to see. It's something that we're happy to support. It's something that we are proud of. If we see you going down into the northwest, and engaging these communities, engaging the different partners, and delivering this training, and explaining the positive peace framework and what role it can play. So thank you for that question. And then the last question before we go on to today, I saw there was a lady who had her hand up, but I think she put it down. I was going to select her for to make sure that we have a good gender balance, but then I think she put her hand down. So we will have Bama Francis Uchechuku. Please go ahead, sir, and
Good morning. Hello, good morning.
yes, good morning. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, I want to give a response to the professor who spoke earlier. He mentioned something about policing and positive peace. Can you hear me?
Please go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay. Now, like I mentioned, just trying to give some clarification to the professor earlier. Now, positive peace, like we were told, is defined as the attitudes, institutions, and structures that create and sustain peaceful societies. Now, the police or the act of policing in itself has a role in ensuring that certain attitudes that promotes peaceful societies are carried out. It's more like telling someone, being an enforcer, so to say, where you tell someone that your right to swing your arms ends where the other man's right to defend his nose begins. Now, the role of the police in this situation comes to play when, for instance, there's something we call reassurance policing, where just by the presence of the police in any society or in an environment can bring a semblance of peace. Remember, we were also taught yesterday that peace is not the absence of violence or trouble, but it has to do with having a semblance of introducing attitudes that will promote some level of peacefulness. So if we looked at it from that perspective, we will be able to see how policing and the military comes to play in this act of positive peace promotion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for your very astute intervention. And then I think lastly, we will have Ebere Obolade. Please go ahead.
Morning, everyone.
Yes, good morning.
Okay.
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to bring up my question. Okay, like I actually want to congratulate IEP in their research. You know, gathering this data is not an easy one. So my concern is application of this positive peace analysis in the application, because we have been told that we have been given the 8 pillars that we can use to actually discover if peace exists, positive peace exists in a particular community or society where you belong to. Now, I'm looking at the application, because there's a place to say if you don't measure it, you may not even know if it's deteriorating, peace is deteriorating, or if it's improving. Now, I work with young people, you know, in schools, and we educate them on peace, living in a peaceful coexistence with others. So how do we measure with the indicators to actually find out if what we are doing is actually bringing, if we're actually making progress, and how do we be able to collect this data based on the 8 pillars and the indicators which we have been given? Please, I want you to throw more light on that so that we'll be able to measure and have a physical data, like you do, empirical data, that will show that there is an improvement or there is deterioration or that there is stability in the positive. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. And I think it's a great question, because it's important for us to realize that in terms of the positive peace framework, we firmly believe that if you can't measure something, then you can't tell whether or not it is improving or getting worse. So that's a very, very important element of using the positive peace framework. Now, you'll notice that, as we mentioned, there are 3 indicators for each pillar of peace. And these are simply the tools you could use or the questions you could ask, for example, at a national or a provincial scale. However, when you go down to a community level, you might want to develop your own question or your own tools. But it's important to make sure that, of course, you according to good research and data collection practice, that you ask the right questions, questions that give you the information you want, firstly, and then secondly, that you ask these questions consistently. So what you might want to do is you take a baseline survey, and it could be something as simple as when you started or before you started your workshop or your intervention, what did group A think of group B? And then you do your project, you do your intervention, and then you ask at the end of the process, what does group A think of group B? And you monitor if there are changes. So things like perceptions and attitudes can be measured in that way. I think there is a pre-workshop and post-workshop survey tool that we use, as well as the IEP, to measure things like that, especially among participants. We're happy to share it with you. So we'll now move on without wasting time to today's presentation. And if I can ask everyone to just take a look at how their name is appearing on the screen. Please make sure that it is your full name and not the name of your device. It makes it easier for us to capture your data, to check the register and make sure that we know exactly who is attending. But if your screen name says, for example, iPhone or Samsung Galaxy, then we don't know what your name is, and we might miss you in taking the register. So thank you for that. The same goes for people who are using just one name, or maybe it's your first name or your last name as well. So it's important for you to please make sure that you record your full name. In terms of the recordings and the presentations, I think they have been converted into PDF and then PowerPoint. So you should see them by end of day today. Apologies for that delay. Okay, so we will go on immediately. Into today's presentation. You will remember that we went through the course or the layout of an ambassador's program, and so we'll skip this. We also introduced what it is that makes the difference between negative peace and positive peace. And we said that negative peace is the absence of violence, it's the absence of fear of violence, it's the absence of crime, it's the absence of all of these negative elements. And then positive peace is the presence of the attitudes, institutions, and structures which sustain positive peace. And in this typification, just as we do with the Global Peace Index or negative peace, we developed a report that looks every year at issues to do with positive peace. You'll note that we've been doing the Global Peace Index, or the report that measures negative peace, for 15 years, and it ranks 163 countries according to their relative states of peace, using 23 indicators according to those three baskets that we mentioned. And then after a few years of doing this, this is when we said, do you know what? Let's take a look at what peace is the presence of. And so we used statistical analysis. We looked at the data sets and we used the indices. And as I mentioned yesterday, well over 60,000 data sets. And then we used this to develop the Positive Peace Index. We've been doing the Positive Peace Index and Positive Peace Report for 8 years now. And it ranks, as I said, 163 countries which is 99.7 of the world's population, with indicators weighted on a 1 to 5 scale. There's 3 indicators for each pillar of peace. And I remember we went through each of the 8 pillars of peace and said these are, number 1, a well-functioning government. And this relates not just to issues to do with elections and democracy, even though those are very, very important elements. It also relates to issues to do with service delivery. Do you have a good police force? Do you have good roads? Do you have hospitals? Do you have schools? And all these are the services, all these are the roles that government plays, both at a central level and also at a local government level. An example of how a well-functioning government could affect peace is if you don't have refuse collection, for example, the people who collect garbage in urban areas, you'll find that before long, people start taking their garbage and throwing it in front of each other's houses. And then before long, people are now fighting and saying, no, why are you putting this at my gate? Or why are you putting this in front of my house? Or why are you putting it in front of the police? You have to call in mediators. You have to call in peacekeepers and so on. But then if you look very carefully, you will notice that what you needed isn't for the police to come in, but for someone to come in and take out the garbage. In some communities where you have a failure in the delivery of water, you'll find that then people have to go and queue for water, for example, at wells or at water points. And before long, you start hearing that there's conflict there. Some people saying, no, you've taken 10 liters instead of 5. You'll find that there are now people who start selling water. You find that now young women and girls start experiencing abuse and victimization at these places. So you'll find that to solve all of those negative consequences, what you need is the delivery of water. What you need is for government to step in and provide the service. And the same thing goes for things like education, for things like transport, for things like health services, and so on and so forth. And it also shows very, very clearly that everyone is a peace builder. You might think that you're working for a council and you simply collect garbage, but no, you do more than that. You secure peace, you contribute towards peace. You might think that you're a driver or a teacher or unemployed or a doctor or whatever other profession you're involved in. But in that way, if you look carefully, if you do not provide the service which you're supposed to, it will affect the level of peace, either in the near future or in the distant future. Another pillar of peace is equitable distribution of resources. And this is an important pillar of peace in that it relates to how well resources in a community are distributed, or opportunities in a community are distributed. Is it only certain genders or certain religions or certain political party members that have access to education, for example, that have access to healthcare? When a company comes and sets itself up in a community, is there only one set of individuals who have access to jobs there? And this is very, very critical in terms of securing not just peace, but positive peace. Because when you see this unequal access to resources, whether it's land, whether it's water, we were speaking yesterday about the farmer-header conflicts, which showed this in some dimension. You'll find that people often go to conflict to make sure that they express themselves and make sure that they gain access to these resources. You also find that you have a lot of conflicts, whether it's online, whether it's bad attitudes towards each other, and so on and so forth. So the equitable distribution of resources is a crucial pillar of peace. Another pillar of peace is the free flow of information. And this looks at 3 things. The first is whether or not you have the mechanisms or the channels to move information. Are there libraries? Is there the internet? Do people have access to phones? Do you have newspapers? Is there a transport system that can make sure that information passes and gets to everyone? And it also relates to the quality of information that goes over these channels. What is the impact of fake news, for example? I'm sure you've all seen it when you hear that so and so has died, or this and this thing happened when it didn't. What it does to communities. Can you imagine? What would happen if someone announced that there is a war, for example, when there isn't one? How people would respond? People would start hoarding things. Some people would start trying to go and join the fight, and so on and so forth. So the free flow of information is a very, very critical pillar of peace. You also notice that, for example, with things like social media, the kind of engagement, the kind of exchanges that go on there, the kind of discourse, it also shows the importance of information, the importance of the free flow of information, the free flow of good information to maintaining peace and good relations in community. Another pillar of peace is high levels of human capital. And this relates again to three things. The first is, are your people educated? Talk about primary school, secondary school, tertiary level education. Do people have access to it? Are your people skilled? Sometimes it's not just education, but people need skills to be able to deliver goods and services. Can they build things? Can they grow things? Can they develop apps? Can they do coding? Are their skills relevant to the job market? And then the third thing is, are your people healthy? And this is important in that it shows that when your people are healthy, they can participate in the economy. But if they're not healthy, then they drain on the finances of both their families and the state, and they put pressure on national resources such as healthcare systems. And this has a very real and direct impact in terms of peace. We spoke earlier about the equitable distribution of resources. When your people aren't educated and skilled, then they don't have access to these opportunities for employment and further education. And this has a real impact in terms of peace. Then you find high levels of crime, then you find high levels of uprising and demonstrations and so on and so forth. The next pillar we have is respect for the rights of others. And again, this is very, very important in that it speaks to issues to do with human rights. And this is something we touched on yesterday. At a more basic level, it speaks to the fact that, are we able to look at other people and accept that they are people in the same way that we are, that they're a full and entire human being, just as we are. When you look at someone of a different gender or a different race or a different religion or a different political party, can you see that they're a person in the same way that you're a person? We often use the example of how men should approach issues to do with menstrual health, for example. When you have a girl who stays in the rural areas and 3, 4, 5 days of the month, she can't go to school because she doesn't have access to, for example, sanitary wear. What impact does that have in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years? When we start looking at her after she's not done well in school and say, no, do you know what? It is this girl's fault. She did this to herself. And yet, if we had simply provided this, it would have gone a long way in terms of ensuring that she is an active, she's a productive, she's a peaceful member of the community. So in this way, the respect for the rights of others is a vital pillar of peace. Another pillar of peace is good neighborliness. At a national level, this relates to issues to do with trade. It relates with issues to do with participation in bodies such as IGAD, COMESA, SADC, the AU, the UN, and so forth. It has to do with issues with whether or not you are at war with other countries. At a local level, it relates to the everyday occurrences that happen between you and I. There could be water disputes, boundary disputes, whether or not you're able to help each other out and speak to each other well as neighbors, and so on and so forth. And this is a crucial and critical pillar of peace. Another pillar of peace is low levels of corruption. And this is important as well in two ways. You'll notice that corrupt people are not the most peaceful. They are not afraid to use violent means to take control, for example, of resources that they want to appropriate corruptly. They also are not afraid to fight amongst themselves. So you'll find where there are high levels of corruption, there are also high levels of conflict and fighting amongst corrupt officials, or what we call factionalized elites. Another thing that happens in corrupt circumstances is that people then are not afraid to go into the streets, for example, to protest. When money that was supposed to go towards building a hospital or building a school or anything else is appropriated, people then go into the streets and start protesting to say, no, 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 we demand jobs, we demand schools, we demand education, we demand health, and so on and so forth. And this has a very, very direct and negative impact in terms of peace. Another pillar of peace, as we mentioned yesterday, is a sound business environment. And quite simply put, this means when there is no foreign direct investment, when there is no local investment, there are no jobs. When there are no jobs, everyone is in the streets. Young people are committing crime, they're getting involved in drugs, and so on and so forth. Then you have the politicians who are unscrupulous coming in to exploit these people, especially in election time, and saying, go and beat up X or go and beat up Y. And then we come in and say, do you know what? It's the government's fault. It's what? But what we need are for young people to be employed, and then they won't engage in these activities. You also find in high unemployment or poor business environments the tendency where there's high levels of inequality, which makes it easy, for example, for terrorism and terrorist groups to come in and exploit these young people for their means. So these are the ways in which the 8 pillars of peace interact or build peace in different communities. If you take a look at my screen now, I think you'll see the 8 pillars of peace, if you would like to list them, as a well-functioning government, a sound business environment, low levels of corruption, acceptance of the rights of others, high levels of human capital, good relations with neighbors, the free flow of information, and equitable distribution of resources. And this is so important in that it will help you see how the community level picture ties into the bigger picture. If you want to have an honest country, you have to make sure that the citizens are honest. If you want to have a strong country, you can't build it on weak citizens or unhealthy citizens. If you want to have a prosperous country, you have to make sure that the individuals' livelihoods are secured and they can contribute actively to the economy and so on and so forth. High levels of positive peace are statistically associated with stronger resilience. And by resilience, we simply mean the ability of a community to bounce back from shocks, to adapt to shocks, whether it's a natural disaster like a flood or a cyclone or an earthquake, or man-made shocks like price increases and inflation and things like that. High levels of positive peace lead to high levels of resilience. High levels of positive peace are also associated with better environmental outcomes. And by this, we mean, for example, the ESG scoring. By this, we mean adaptation to climate change issues. By this, we mean making sure that the environment, the water sources, the land resources, and so on and so forth, the biodiversity are well taken care of. Positive peace is also associated with high levels of well-being and happiness, as well as better performance on development goals. And this means not just the sustainable development goals, but national development targets, even down to, for example, key performance indicators for local government structures. Positive peace will bring about better performance on these things. In addition to that, I think we mentioned this yesterday, that there is a higher per capita income, which is a higher income per individual. Positive peace brings about this improvement. And in addition to that, positive peace is also associated with high levels of inclusion. So you find that women, youth, persons with disabilities, people of different religions and political parties are able to cooperate and develop more inclusively in high positive peace environments. Here you'll see on the slide on your screen something that points to the earlier point I made, that there is higher levels of per capita income, which of course leads to high levels of household consumption. Because when there's high levels of positive peace and all its benefits, income improves, and then households are able to spend more, whether it's on food, whether it's on household goods, whether it's on cars, whether it's on education, and this also drives forward economic growth. You'll notice again another statistical link between positive peace and economic output is the link between positive peace and inflation. You'll notice there that the red bar on your screen demonstrates that where you have positive peace deteriorating, there is a close correlation to high inflation rates. And then where positive peace improves, then you have very low or lower at least levels of inflation. I think we mentioned that very recently, I think about 2 weeks ago, is when we released the 2022 Positive Peace Report. And it demonstrated that 126 countries have become more peaceful, while 36 have become less peaceful. The improvements were driven very largely by the free flow of information. There is now so much access to technology, more use of the internet, more access to learning, more channels for dialogue and communication. There's also high improvements in terms of good relations with neighbors and the equitable distribution with resources. However, there were also very distinct deteriorations in the attitudes domain, particularly low levels of corruption. There are instances of corruption taking place, and also the perceptions of corruption are also very, very low, because communities or citizens have lower levels of trust in terms of public officials and other stakeholders. I'll skip the next few slides, including the one with the top 10 positive peace countries. You'll see that Sweden and Denmark are the highest positive peace communities, and then they're joined by Australia, Canada, Norway, Germany, and Ireland. And then the lowest positive peace countries, you'll find that Somalia is the one with the lowest levels, and other countries in the region who are in the bottom 10 include South Sudan, Central African Republic, Chad, the DRC, and Sudan. So this again has a very, very real impact in terms of our region, and then hopefully it's something we could see improving, as we move forward. In terms of the 8 pillars of peace, you'll see, as I mentioned earlier, that the free flow of information has been the biggest climber in terms of improvements, followed by equitable distribution of resources and good relations with neighbors. And then the only pillar which we had deteriorations is, of course, low levels of corruption. If you take a look at the yellow bar, that is the overall positive peace score. So overall, you had a 2.4% increase or 2.4% improvement in the overall positive peace score. And that's something that is good at a global scale, at least. In terms of the regional scores, you'll note that Sub-Saharan Africa, you'll note it, I think it's the third from the bottom, and it did make some improvements. North America is the only region which as a whole experienced a large and wholesale deterioration. So again, that's something great. Now, coming in or focusing on Nigeria, you'll see that Nigeria is number 135 out of 163 countries, having lost 3 places in the past decade. And this places the country in a low peace category. So to be clear, this means that the issues to do with attitudes, institutions, and structures which sustain peace that need to be addressed. And I think just as we did with the Global Peace Index, I will be honing in on the different indicators and showing you which precise indicators caused these changes. You'll note that Nigeria is ranked number 27 out of the 44 countries in the Sub-Saharan region. So that is a little bit better than how it's doing in the Global Peace Index, where I think it's 39, and then on the Terror Index, where it is the most impacted country. Now you'll note here that this is a comparison of Nigeria and the rest of Sub-Saharan Africa. In pink or orange is the score or the performance of the average performance of Sub-Saharan Africa, and in blue you will have the performance or the score for Nigeria. So you'll notice that, for example, for free flow of information, Nigeria is below average in terms of the region. And yet for the acceptance of the rights of others, for example, you'll see that it's well above the average. You'll note there that Nigeria from 2009 to 2020 has improved by 0.5%, while the rest of the region improved by 1.6%. So it might seem like a small change, but this is important, and it's actually a large change. As I said, when you take into account the size of Nigeria, the population of Nigeria, even a 0.5% improvement is a big improvement. The institutions domain is the one which improved greatly. However, there were deteriorations in the attitudes and structures. And I'm sure you can see that on the right side of the slide, where institutions improved by 2.5, and then attitudes and structures deteriorated by 0.5 and 2.8 respectively. Now, in terms of the individual indicators, you'll notice in green the indicators which improved, with the biggest indicator improving being individuals using the internet, where there was a very, very large improvement, followed by inequality adjusted life expectancy, healthy life expectancy, and then a decline in public theft, and then all the other indicators there. You'll notice that there was no change in access to public services and equality of opportunity, and laws to support the treatment of population segments. We mentioned yesterday something called systems thinking. And quite simply put, a system is something that is made up of different parts which interact to achieve a certain goal. For example, the human body is a system. And when we look at the human body, we can try and say, what is the most important part? Is it the head? Is it the lungs? Is it the liver? Is it the legs? But if you take a careful look, you'll find that everything is important. Everything plays its part. Because if you take the head away and say the head is the most important thing, so we should protect it, then you kill the rest of the body. Even if you take a look at something like the appendix, which people say does not have a function, if you take out the appendix, or if that appendix gets infected, then you find that the rest of the body does not function well. Then you find that you have illness. Something as small as a tooth, when it's infected and painful, leads to the rest of the body not functioning well. So this is the same thing with the 8 pillars of peace. They function as a system. If you take a country like Nigeria, for example, it has a police system, it has a school system, it has a health system, and all of these parts play their role in terms of building a strong community. And so if there is a challenge or an ill or a problem in one of those systems, it's likely to affect the way the rest of the system or the rest of the country operates. And this is the way that we look at these pillars. When we look at these pillars, it's impossible to look at them and say one pillar is more important than the other. Every pillar has its part to play. Every pillar is equally important. And you'll notice again that when we look at the 8 pillars of peace, they have a reinforcing relationship with each other. You'll find that a well-functioning government, for example, leads to low levels of corruption. At the same time, low levels of corruption to a well-functioning government. The same can be said for example, the free flow of information. A strong and functioning media improves the functioning of government, and at the same time, when government function improves, you have a stronger and more well-functioning media. Okay, sorry, my apologies. Just want to bring back our slides there. And another important part of systems is that they operate on what's called the feedback loop. And this is something that I was explaining, that when you have an input in one pillar, it affects the rest of the system. For example, when you have good relations with neighbors being affected, it might mean that at a national level, it affects your sound business environment because you'll have less trade and so on and so forth. If we take a look at systems thinking, you'll notice that sometimes the input does not have a direct line with the output because of how complex the system is. An example we like to give is if you have a society that needs water and there's no water, and you dig a well, you might think that you have solved one problem, but then before long, you start having the conflicts that we mentioned earlier. So you'll find that sometimes the input does not match the output. And you have to take a broader look at things in order to have a solution that is comprehensive and a solution that works. I think this slide explains what we were speaking about earlier in terms of the interrelationship and the linkages between the different pillars of peace, where well-functioning government affects free flow of information, and free flow of information affects a well-functioning government. And the same relationship exists between all of the pillars. All of them are equal and all of them are important. So while sometimes you might not have an intervention that can touch all of the pillars, you'll find that it'll at least touch some of them. And it's important to make sure that you drive that forward with the awareness of how these pillars interact. So I think that brings an end to the presentation that was on the offline session. And now I will be happy to take a few questions and have your inputs and views and contributions from the group. Thank you. Okay. I'll start with Kenneth. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. Kenneth, we can't hear you, sir. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
I'm Rotarian Kenneth. I have a question. When you were talking yesterday, for example, there are two communities. One community is depending on the others, like farming. One community depends on the others for farming, like giving them farmland to farm. Then suddenly, being that the one that owns the farmland, then suddenly they get another proposal from another community, like the Fulanis, that yes, they want to rear cattle in this farmland. And being that the money offered from the Fulanis is much, to give it to the Fulanis. Why as there is an understanding agreement between the farmer, the first farmer. So the Fulani came in and they started destroying the crops of the first farmer. As a peace builder, what will you do?
Okay. Thank you very much for that question. And it's a great question. Can you please ask this question tomorrow, the first thing, as the first thing that we do tomorrow?
Okay, no problem.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Abubakar Musa Dice, please go ahead, sir, and then mute yourself and then go ahead with your question. Yes, sir, you're still muted. Abubakar Musa, please go ahead and I'm afraid I'm not getting any audio from you, so you might need to use the chat function. My apologies for that. You might need to use the chat function. I can't hear you, sir. Next, we'll have Sadia Murtala. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm going to say good morning. It's been a very nice presentation, and I was going to say first, you're so intelligent, trust me, because it's not, it's very easy to read out for people and just let them get information. But trust me, it has been a very educative and very, very informing session for me. What I've learned from this session, and I hope to really share this to everyone on this call, is I've always thought that positive peace and also having peace in the community has to do with government, is a work for government and not a work for everyone. So from what we've learned here, all the parents we have here, all the individuals working in different sectors in the country, I'm sure that we now know that peacekeeping is for everyone. It's for everyone. As much as you see something not going well, I was with a sister earlier this week, and she said something was wrong, but then it's not my problem. It's not just my problem. And that was even before I started this training. And I just said, from just a honest mind, that it's our problem, because when it gets so bad, we get affected. And then if we as a person don't get affected, trust me, our children might get affected. So all I'm going to say is peacekeeping, as I had taught myself before, it's not just for government, it's for me and you, it's for everybody. We just have to look for a way to contribute to positive peacekeeping. So it's a work for everybody. And most especially, I want to say thank you. It's been long I've seen someone as intelligent as you. Trust me, I'm not saying this in a pretentious way. I'm being very honest. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your compliments. For myself and both the IAP, we appreciate it. And I think you underscored or underlined two things that are vital. The first is that everyone has a part to play. It doesn't matter whether you think you are a small part of the community or you're a large part of the community. No matter what your station is, everyone has a part to play. Everyone has ownership in building peace and positive peace. And the second thing that you mentioned that's important is that peace is never an accident. It doesn't happen by itself. We always need to be deliberate. We always need to be intentional in monitoring our attitudes, in monitoring our institutions, in monitoring our structures. And I think I mentioned before that this positive peace is something that we want to use as either a mirror or a lens. So as a mirror, we put it up and we look at ourselves, we look at our community, we look at our country, and we say, how are we performing? What would we like to see happen? What are the things that are missing? How can we improve? And ask these and other questions in terms of building positive peace. And as a lens, we can use it in the same way to take a look at the world and analyze, the areas that need to improve and the costs that we're missing out on. Oh, sorry. Solomon, may you please go ahead and unmute and ask your questions, sir.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I really appreciate the fact that we are together here on this platform to make our nation better with this peace program we are engaging. Now, my question is, when we talk about positive peace, bringing it down to the level of Nigeria. Now, when we talk about positive peace, we say that the federal government is involved in making it happen. For example, in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria, they have resources that all the Nigerians are dependent on. And now at the end of the day, they now are not involved fully in sharing formula of the resources properly. Their land is being used to extract this thing everybody needs in Nigeria. And at the end of the day, they can't farm, they can't even fish, which is their line of business. And now we are having issues from that side. Now, if you want to employ this positive peace in this part of the country, how do we employ it, please, sir? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your question. And I think you highlighted a real life example. And so I don't want to be too simplistic in terms of approaching it. But from just listening, you can tell that there are several pillars which are involved there. For example, a well-functioning government, which obviously creates the policy environment in which these different parties interact and communicate. There's also a sound business environment in terms of whether or not people are able to take up these fishing opportunities, these farming opportunities, and generate income for themselves and their communities. There's also good relations with neighbors involved. And I think one of the important things about the positive peace framework and how we would recommend it be used in instances like that is that it gives communities the language to communicate with other stakeholders. For example, when you begin to apply these 8 pillars, it's easy to then approach whether it's a government institution, whether it's central or local government, and use the language of positive peace in order to show the impact that a community would like, or the changes a community would like. It's then easy to translate this into policies. It's easy, for example, to then approach, for example, private sector partners, whether it's a bank and you want loans or an input scheme or something like that, and say, this is what the impact of positive peace will be in terms of your interest as a business. So I think this is something we'll go into tomorrow a little bit more together with the question we had earlier. So thank you very much for that. If you have a question, please feel free to type it in the chat box. If you can't raise your hand or speak. Doris Igechuku, please go ahead and ask your question.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't want to ask question. I just want to say thank you so much for the lecture. It's an eye-opener. Aside from the fact that we are learning and aiming to get our certificate, it's also an eye-opener for us not to be lazy at getting reluctant in taking decisions that are meant to find positive change in our nation, Nigeria. And when we talk about nation Nigeria, aside from the fact that the emphasis is mostly on Nigeria, we also have to consider that our community, like in the little environment where we are, that this positive peace starts there, in taking responsibility, in taking decisions, in advocating, because as now that we are learning, we are now like being put at the forefront to continue to advocate. Because if people's mindset are changed dramatically on issues of corruptions and all that, at least one-on-one talk. Sometimes for men, they go to watch football, they engage in football. They can also engage in peace talk. Sometimes we find ourselves in transits, probably we are not driving, we find ourselves in so many bus transport. We can engage in discussions that can see a way of finding lasting solution to problems we are going to. Remember, you said it's a gradual process. So the gradual process is that it is meant for each and every one of us going through this training to see it as a responsibility that every day we go out, we have a way of changing people's mind, at least one. From there, you start pushing for bigger opportunity to meet with the communities and the leaders who are involved. Like recently, I was able to meet somebody who is the king of the community where I am. So I am soliciting to him to give me access for me to be able to reach the chairman of my community where I live on a possible way that we can find solution as a young person to existing problem. Because the other day in my community, I was walking, I saw a young girl at over about 15 years of age smoking in an open area. You see how that kind of thing is. And she was surrounded by a lot of men. So I had to beg the person who carried me on transit to help me go talk to, because I knew at that point in time, if I go talk to her, there are a lot of men there. She might not listen to me. So I needed a man as well that is in their midst that can help me talk to her. So these are problems that we don't just ignore and feel, oh, it is none of my business, it is nothing. So we have a way of, as peace builder, keep on networking to meet the right people who will take us to the right leaders, because sometimes we'll be like, can I have access to this leader? Can I have access? But through network with the right people, you can have access to the leaders to address these issues and also make suggestions on how things can be done for a better society. Because if you have a better community, we can also have a better nation, which is a gradual process. Thank you so much for the teachings. And I know that it calls for us to continue much in advocating very big everywhere we find ourselves, so that we can get a better Nigeria that we deserve. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your intervention, and I think you outlined very well and spoke very well about the kind of impact, the kind of outcome that we would like to see, the kind of work we would like to see, and I think it's such a wonderful thing to hear you say that you are speaking to the king of the community and you want to have access to the chairman of the community, because a tool like this in their hands, it's no longer just talking to one person. It's now giving the whole community, a new, a fresh tool for governing. Because if now local leaders are using a positive peace approach that brings about the presence of good attitudes, good institutions, good structures in their communities, a community in which people support each other, a community in which people recognize that these small efforts are not small efforts, they are big. So when you see these small issues like one young person using drugs, you realize the impact it could have in the future. So thank you very much for your intervention, and now we'll move on to Yusuf Musa. Please go ahead and mute yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Please
thank you
go
very
ahead.
much for this wonderful presentation. Well, my own question will be in regards to Yusuf Musa from Kaduna State, probably the northwestern part of Nigeria. And my own question will be in regards to the happenings of banditry in the northwestern part of Nigeria. Even though we've gone through the positive pillars, and it clearly shows that even the citizens have a role to play in attaining positive peace, but in the northwestern part of Nigeria, whereby we have activities of banditry, and we all know from history, it started from deprivation of some of their laws and rights, and also it has to do with scrambling for natural resources here and there. And you find out that governments, particularly in the northwestern part of the country, are divided. Some are soliciting for a dialogue with these bandits and terrorists, and while others are saying no, we have to fight them head on to tackle this problem. So applying this strategy, how do you think we can go about it to achieve this positive peace? Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much for your question. I couldn't hear all of it very clearly, but I think you're referring to the banditry instances or incidents that are happening in the Northwest. And I think you also mentioned, the role of citizens and how to apply positive peace in those sorts of areas. And I think, as I said, the positive peace framework is a mirror and a lens. So, for example, if you're looking to use it as a lens, you could look, for example, at the state of security infrastructure. Is there a good police force? Should community policing be involved? Is there good access to when, for example, the bandits come? Is there a way that citizens can get access to the police force and the police responds quickly? If you want to look at, for example, what citizens can do at their level, it could be making sure that they counter the messaging that comes to whether they're young people or older people or children to be attracted to such activities. Because you'll find that at some point, a young person is approached by such groups and something lures them, whether it's financial, whether it's because of other factors. So these are the things that communities can look at in a very direct way and say, what are the things that are pulling our people away? Do we need, therefore, for example, a simple thing like having a youth center where young people can come and have access to skills, have access to something like the internet, where young people can look for jobs and things like that, can go a long way and impacting. And I think possibly with some of these examples, you would know a lot better than I do, because of course of how aware you are of the context, and also how aware you are of the capacities that exist in the different communities. So thank you for your question. Smith Omotayo Pascal, please go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, good afternoon.
All right. My name is Smith Omotayo Pascal. I'm the Director ICT Programs and Development for Youth for Transparency International. I want to make a couple of comments and ask a question. My first comment is to all my fellow participants. We are all stakeholders and activists in our various capacities across the world around Nigeria. I would like to direct my comments to my fellow Nigerians. Looking at the 8 pillars of positive peace, I would like to recommend like we take them in stages, probably 2 pillars per quarter or whatever, to be able to have impact and be able to monitor what we are doing. While doing that, I would like to encourage networking and partnership. I've seen the profiles and names of a few people, and I've taken notes down on people I would like to work with. As peace ambassadors, there's so much we can do alone, but when we come together as a group, like I can see we have a good number of people from Kaduna, different states that have 3, 4, 5 participants from the same states. I would recommend we come together and work together and do things as peace ambassadors so that we can have more impact, we have less duplications, and we can reach more people. I would also like to suggest, because I'm on different stakeholder committees on education, here in Abuja, the UNICEF Stakeholder Committee on Education in Emergencies, and I'm currently working with some organizations of persons with disability. I'm also on their education committee, which comes to one of my questions, like, how are we using the 8 pillars to get persons with disability involved in this peace building? And how do we inculcate the 8 pillars of positive peace in our current educational framework? Because we've lost a lot in our educational sector in Nigeria. I remember back in the days, we used to have social education and some other aspects which taught patriotism, peaceful living, and basically covers some of the things in the 8 pillars. And currently, we don't have those in our educational curriculum. So I would suggest we start with either the secondary or the tertiary institutions, network with student groups, unions, association, clubs in the schools. Youth for Transparency International, we have transparency clubs, and immediately I started this training, I decided I was going to include the 8 pillars of peaceful peace in our clubs and all that, to also encourage the students and the pupils to understand the need for peace and how they can coexist with their fellow neighbor, with their people from other states. Looking at our NYSC program, the 8 pillars can be structured into the NYSC program. Let's go for advocacy, talk to community leaders, our politicians. I feel we will be able to have more impact and do more if we can synergize and have a well-structured plan of action for individual regions or states or community. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, sir, for your intervention, and then also for highlighting once more all of the 8 pillars. There's so much that you shared with us that I think is very important, and I think you're also monitoring the chat to see the responses
Yes.
to your to your interjection. So thank you very much for that. I think an important part that I picked from what you said is
Yes.
how you've now started to use the positive piece as something added to bring added effectiveness, to bring added understanding, to bring added value to work you're already doing. So when you take the positive piece framework, it doesn't mean that you throw out all the other things you were doing before. It's simply an added tool to add to the things you're already doing, the things you're already working on. So this then, improves understanding and shows, example, the linkages between the different aspects. For example, there are situations where advocates, for example, for sexual and reproductive health and rights, have been struggling to connect with partners in certain government ministries or in other sectors, for example, like the private sector. But then using the 8 pillars of peace, you can just, or the example you mentioned of persons with disability, then you can show the linkages to say a sound business environment links with our concerns or our priorities in this way, and this is the way we can support each other. I think you were asking how we can get persons with disabilities involved. There was a response that said the respect of the rights of others is one pillar, but all of the pillars work, because then you can ask, for example, in terms of human capital development, how do you provide services or access to good health, better education, better skills to persons with disability so that they can participate in the economy? Are there schools that can accommodate their various differences in capacity, whether they're physical, intellectual, vision related, or anything else? So thank you very much. And also the step-by-step approach is also a very, very brilliant idea. Thank you so much for that. I wish you the best of luck in your work, and we will be very, very grateful to participate and support you in any way we can. So thank you for that, sir. Florence Erondu, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Hello.
Yes, good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon, my fellow participants. Of a truth, this program is so impactful. I appreciate it. So, Mr. Mixtin, is a kind of a comment and a follow-up question. For the past 3 days, we've been on this program, we've been talking about peace, positive peace, promoting positive peace, and protecting peace. And we know that a peace, positive peace, like you told us, there's an absence of war, crime, absence of war. When you don't have peace, that means there is a war and the country is not safe. For instance, Nigeria, where I come from, we have so much insecurity. And I want to tell you that in this part of when there is a crisis, when there is no peace in a country, there are group of persons that suffers it most. And you can agree with me that the women and the young girls, they suffers it most. So my question now is, in this program, like we have enumerated 8 pillars of peace. I think one of them I can pick is the respect for human rights. So is there any tools which we have put in place, or which the international world has put in place to cushion the effects of crisis and not being in peace as it affects to this group of people?
Thank you very much for your question. I think it focused very, very largely on issues to do with young women and girls, and the effects that conflict has on their lives. And I think the consequences are well documented, and there are many. in conflict environment. So I think, for example, one of the very key tools that are in place at an international level is UN Agenda 1325, UN Resolution 1325, which deals exclusively with women, peace, and security, and ending violence and against women and girls. So I think at an international level, that's one of the things that exist. There are many others. For example, there are instruments to do with the youth, which focus again on young women and girls. There are other instruments to do with children, and these are all tools I think that you can refer to when you're engaging your various governments to try and bring about change. And as I said, the positive peace framework or the positive peace data and data from all other IEP reports then comes in as supporting evidence to bring that added value, to bring that added impact, especially at community level in the lives of people who are affected. So I think we'll be very, very interested in hearing more about your work. And again, wish you the best of luck in your project and presentation. Thank you so much. Next we have Jida Shetima Babagana. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good morning.
Please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, sir. How are you?
Okay. My own is contribution. You know, peace. Hello? Are you
Yes,
looking at
go
me?
ahead. We can hear you.
Contribution to the peace development in the nation. Contribution to the peace development in the nation. My own is that once there is engagement, that is engagement of youth to work, once the youth are engaged to work, I think they don't have any other narrowness of mind, or nobody will going to brainwash them to navigate their minds and intention to terrorism and the rest. Once the youth are engaged, all this kind of terrorism is based on lack of anything. There is no way. There is no way.
Sorry, sir. Your audio is cutting in and out. We couldn't hear, but I think you were talking about the youth, the importance of the youth, how central they are, and how when they get into these war situations or war contexts, it can bring a narrowness of mind, and then it's important to take them out of that. So that they begin to see the world in a different way, and even if they've been involved in war or violence in the past, to bring them out of those things and point them in a new direction. And these are definitely the outcomes that we want to see. This is the kind of work that we would like to see supported. And I think this point is vitally important. I know you used it and then called out youth in particular, but it also applies to women and girls. It also applies to various other groups. So thank you very much for that. Next, we'll have Angelis. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and make your question or comment. Angelis, please go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay. I think they might be having challenges. So next, can we please have Chibuzo Madu? Please go ahead and unmute yourself and make your contribution.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you,
Good
Mr.
afternoon.
Milton, for your presentation. My question is based on the 8 pillars of peace, which measures the positive peace. According to the 8 pillars of peace, using the measurement, you say that Sweden and Denmark are ranked highest as a most peaceful. Then is there a relationship between this negative peace and the positive peace? Because looking at the previous day's presentation, we were talking about the GPI, the Global Peace Indicators, which is actually measures the negative peace, to my own understanding. And Iceland and Zealand, we are among the most peaceful countries. So how can we relate the two instances now, positive peace and negative peace? How can we have a relationship between two of them to have a global or a overall peace? That is in the measurement of peace. Thank you.
That is a brilliant question, and I'll answer it in two ways. I think yesterday when we were speaking about the difference between negative peace and positive peace, I think there's someone who has their mic open. Okay. When we're speaking about the difference between negative peace and positive peace, we mentioned that negative peace measures the absence of war, the absence of crime, according to those three baskets, which is militarization, safety and security, and then internal and external conflict. Positive peace is a measure of the presence of the attitudes, institutions, and structures which sustain peace. And the link between the two is very important and very direct. So you'll find that, for example, there are countries where you have, for example, Equatorial Guinea, which has a positive peace index score of 150. So they're 150 on positive peace out of 163. And then in terms of the global peace index, they're number 159. So this is a 91 place difference. And what this is called a positive peace deficit, because it shows that the attitudes, the institutions, and the structures which sustain peace are not strong, which is why the positive peace instance or the positive peace score is very bad and is worse than the global peace index score. And you'll find that in many situations, when things like that happen, it shows that the future is not very bright in terms of peace. I'm sure you could look at the events that happened in Equatorial Guinea over the past few months and weeks as testament of how this direct link between positive peace and negative peace occurs. You'll find that when your institutions, your structures, and your attitudes are not strong, it shows that in the future, you could have a possible problem. It's an early warning system, as we said, when you have a worse positive peace score than your global peace index, to say that unless you do things differently, then your future might not be as bright as possible. So, and you also find, for example, that high positive peace countries improve in the future in terms of their peace situation. And you'll find that in countries like the ones you mentioned, like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and so forth, they're able to stay peaceful because they maintain those attitudes, those institutions, those structures which sustain peace. And therefore, are able to defend their very good global peace index or negative peace scores as well. So thank you for that question. And I think I'll add that to the slides I will share with you later. Next, may we please have Professor Onyeke Alpheus. Please go ahead and ask your question, please.
All right. My question is rather a comment. I think that these countries mentioned, I read them yesterday, and I was thinking that the indicators were comparing orange with apple, in the sense that peace is the capacity to unify diversities. And if you look at Nigeria, for example, with all sorts of diversity, 521 languages, and other socioeconomic diversity, and you are comparing it with Sweden, Iceland, and New Zealand, with a little population of about, most of them less than 10 million. Is there a way we can really structure these parameters of measures of positive peace to take into consideration the diversities that exist in countries? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your question. And I think this is one of the main reasons why we use a unified set of indicators. It's why we apply them evenly across the world and across the nation. And they highlight these different factors. And you'll see that these are the things that bring about the differences in rankings. So when you have a society with high levels of diversity, as you put it, you're more likely to have high levels of conflict. And we record it as such and report it as such. But then there's an important element you highlight. I wouldn't necessarily agree with you that it's comparing apples and oranges. But then I think it's important to highlight that there is higher value in comparing, for example, African countries amongst themselves. There's higher value in focusing on a country like Nigeria and then focusing on its own context. And then you measure it against itself and monitor progress over time, which again is something that we do. I think I mentioned earlier that we would be very interested in doing something like a Nigeria Peace Index or a Northwest Province Peace Index, so that then there isn't this feeling that the context isn't being considered carefully. And then we can look very, very closely at the specific contextual differences, at the specific contextual issues that exist. But then in terms of the national differences, we use an equal playing field, if you will. And then some of these differences, of course, exist and can't be helped. I hope I answered your question. But thank you for that question.
No problem. Thank you.
And then Success, may you please unmute yourselves?
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me, please, Mr. Meeting? Okay.
Yes, okay. I can.
Yes, thank you. My name is Success from Edo State. Okay, the Executive Director of Success Foundation. The foundation is a mind reform organization that is focusing on young persons. So currently we agree that there is need for us to attend to young people, especially for the fact that they are not deviating from what seems to be the norms. Like, for instance, young persons will tell you that there's no need for education anymore. They just want to focus on, getting wealth so that they can, live that loud life that they truly want to live. So in essence, they don't believe in education. So the effect is that you now see young persons, for the guys, going into crime. Then you see the girls, doing other things, or maybe going out with these guys that are into crime just because they want some quick money from them. So at the end of the day, what do you now get? You see young girls falling victim for these young guys. At the end of the day, you see, the whole thing is messed up. So this is the essence why Success Foundation saw the need to come in between these gaps so that we can be able to bridge them. So that being said, I was not able to start with this program the very first day and second day because I had issue with the logging in system. I could not connect. So, but I started with you yesterday, then today. So I think this question would have been very important the very first day, but being that yesterday was my first day, I also thought it's needful for me to ask this. I truly want to know the overall goal of this training, the overall goal of this training. What does the training intend to achieve at the end of this program? Then also, as individuals, organization, and institution, how can we impart this knowledge that we are getting right now to our various communities? Then I was also thinking, so at the end of the day, are we going to be engaged by the trainer to use the knowledge that we've acquired, or are we going to be expected to use it in any way we can? So yes, then the other question I have is on the Peace Academy. I think I got the information yesterday. Is it mandatory that we take the courses? Then how about those who will be unable to partake from the academy? Okay, I think these are my questions. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you very much, and congratulations on your organization and the work you do. I think even before learning about positive peace, you're contributing to positive peace with all the work you do. And now I'll address your questions. The overall goal of this training is to equip or empower you with this positive peace knowledge, with this positive peace skill. And this will allow you to go on and either do training in your communities or in your organizations. It will empower you to begin conversations with different stakeholders from across the different from different sectors. It will empower you to begin dialogue. It will empower you to use this positive peace framework as an added tool, as we mentioned, in your work. Another outcome of this project is that we are hoping that you will now have access to a network of other ambassadors. I heard Mr. Smith mentioning that he's already noted people that he would like to work with, and this is something that we encourage and would like to see going on. So that's another goal of this training. I think we mentioned it in the opening ceremony, as well as subsequent instances, that the end result has to be something practical, something tangible, a real change in the lives of people, a real change in the way you approach things, a real positive change in terms of outcomes, whether they're at community level or at national level or at international level. So this is what we want to see. The other part of your question related to the academy, yes, you'll be expected to complete the academy. So please, as soon as you are able to, please complete the academy. And again, it will just underline and highlight the 8 pillars of peace, systems thinking, and the things we are discussing here in another way, hopefully to bring greater levels of clarity and greater levels of understanding. And I think the academy is available in over 60 languages. So hopefully there'll be a language there that you can also appreciate the 8 pillars of peace in, and then this will make it easier to understand and easier to pass on to other players as well. So thank you for that. Next we'll have Eze Philip. Please go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I am Eze Philip. I'm reaching you from Enugu, Nigeria. It's been a very interesting training, I must say. But I want to make a contribution, and that is in line with what the first professor that spoke to us earlier when we started this today. He mentioned that if at the end of this training, we were not able to collaborate with the government, this training, the goals, the expectation will not really come to reality. Because the people we are discussing, these 8 pointers or pillars of peace, of positive peace, if you look at it, take for example, peaceful collaboration or existence with neighbors, we are looking at how we can't really discuss these 8 pillars without the government. That is the point. We must get in touch with the government with their using their institutions, the police, every other aspect of government, because we need them to know what this mission, this movement is about. We must work in line. For example, here in Enugu, last week, there was a shootout that claimed the life of like 6 policemen by unknown government. So this is the kind of society we are living in. So if you want to discuss peace in terms of security, you must call in the police so that they will give their take, their challenges, and everything that have to be done to make sure that that aspect, we achieve the goal. That is one. And I want to say that my friend, like he would likely put, he will say that the clergyman is actually preaching to the wrong people. It's actually a joke. What I mean by that is people that have the chance to be in the church are already enlightened about the faith they are being preached to. But there are others outside that doesn't even know what the faith is about, which are the people that need that knowledge more. So our work is to make sure that, as far as I'm concerned, us that are in this training, we have already gotten a reasonable level of knowledge about peace, be it negative or positive. But there are people that doesn't even know what we are discussing. We need to get to these people. And these are people that are causing mayhem and hazard every day. And to do that, we need to work with local languages, not English. We need to make sure that the medias are used to make sure that this thing we are preaching are being said in the language they can understand. Are you following what I'm saying? So
yes,
that is where the media comes. The media should be a very key partner or stakeholder in this movement. And if that is done, then in the school curriculum, like the guy from Abuja said, our school curriculum need to have a touch of these things, because they say charity begins at home. And I believe the school is a very good foundation for this movement. So that is my submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your submission. I think you mentioned several key things. I think we all have a part to play was the first one you really touched on. And this is vitally important, because sometimes when we are building peace, if we're on the government side, There are times you want to leave out, for example, media, or leave out young people, or leave out the business sector. But then we can't, because if our table has 8 legs and we take away 4 or 5 of them, it's no longer a strong table. It would be stronger if it had all 8 legs or all 8 pillars of peace. So that's a very, very vital thing. I think even amongst ourselves in civil society, when we want to go on and make good community impact, then we leave out government. And then this again is a challenge and doesn't bring about the outcomes you want. So I think that's a very, very critical point to make sure that everyone is included, everyone plays their part, everyone makes these investments and changes that need to be made. And I think the other main, aspect that you mentioned is how vitally critical it is to make the positive peace framework palatable or easy to appreciate for everyone. You know, not just those in the church, but those outside the church, to use from your example. So this is one of the reasons why we do this training, because we know that you have a greater reach than we do as the IEP. You're more able and more ready to be able to go out into these communities, even in terms of the language. You have more capacity to understand the local language, to understand the local context. Of course, we've put the academy up in the 60+ languages, but then that is not even a fraction of the languages in the world. And I know that in terms of the language groups in Nigeria, we haven't even covered all of them. So I think it's important then, as ambassadors, we are ready and available to lend the support, whether it's our positive peace implementation guide, whether it's the training manual, whether it's some of our reports and data. It would be a wonderful thing if they can be available in written form or even in audio form in all these languages, so that they are ready to consume for everyone. So thank you very much for that intervention. Next, we'll have Jacqueline Kachi. Please go ahead.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, hello.
Okay. Thank you very much for this program. It's very impactful. One thing I like about the program is it creates an opportunity for a lot of us to rub minds and to know exactly what other people are thinking about peace all over Nigeria and generally at the world at large. So it's highly commendable. In this regard, I want to make a contribution and talk about, because I did my doctorate degree, and then I did a research work on women and their role in peace building, right? So one area I feel sometimes we forget is that women have a lot to bring to the table, in the sense that in every home, we know family as a major agent of socialization, right? And then in a lot of families, a lot of the men and husbands who eventually get involved in a lot of critical issues as regards to peace building are being groomed by women. So I am talking about changing a culture of literally conditioning from a culture of war to a culture of peace. And it can start in the home, because they say that the children are the leaders of tomorrow. What I'm talking about now is teaching mothers from basic things like teaching your kids how to manage conflict in the home, teaching them that conflict is part of human life. It's normal. It's part of what you're going to experience daily. And conflict can actually transform and become something that is for greater good, both for yourself and the general society. It just depends on how you manage it. Little things, I see mothers teach their children, if somebody fights you in school, fight back. That's the culture of war. How about when we teach our children that what causes conflict? Conflict is I want this, you want this. Let's compromise, let's negotiate, let's mediate and find out how we can have a win-win. Once children begin to internalize these ideas and they grow with it, they are still children, yes, but they grow up to become men. They grow up to become the leaders we have in the society. And the leaders we have in the society end up in the government. And then when you see countries fighting against countries is because they can't seem to come to a resolve. So I believe that apart from the fact that women are very key in socialization and internalizing values that are important where peace is concerned. When we come to the communities, a lot of husbands, a lot of men are also influenced by their husbands, by their wives. And so we cannot be, it's important for us to also target the women in the community. And I'll tell you that when I did my research, on peace building in the community. I did research on women in Igbo land and the effects they have on conflict in the community. And I'll tell you that the local women have a lot to bring to the table where peace is concerned. They are the best US systems. We have early warning detection systems. They know when things are about to break down and they can tackle it to the root. Even when the men, ego and things cannot get them to reconcile, the women can actually go, the women have a way of breaking down conflict in a way that you cannot even believe. I mean, in their own local mentality. So I think we need to understand that women have a lot to bring to the table. We need to empower them. But let's also remove them from this. When we talk about the North, a lot of the terrorists that we're seeing, they're young boys. They're coming out of homes where they're coming out, and they're still children in a lot of ways. And they have mothers that can, make a different influence. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say. And then also, I want to also say that when we are organizing things for peace, when we are organizing forums, whatever it is we are doing, let the grassroots women are key. Schools, teaching women what to do at home. Because even when you finish teaching in the school and you go home, the mother teaches something different. And then the child is at conflict as to what is this piece exactly, where my teacher is teaching me different, and then my mother is teaching me different. So I just want to bring that dimension to our discourse on peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution. I think it's such a vital thing that our work is research based. I think that is very important, and this is a good dimension you brought in. And I think the role of women in both the home, the role of women in other spheres is important, and making sure that there is that tie in, because one of the worst things that could happen is where you have this positive peace framework, but it's a framework for work and it's a framework for school. But then when you go back into the home, when you go back into the community, it doesn't exist. If you are training people not to commit GBV, and then they only respect women or other genders when they're at work and at school, but when they go back home, they do other things, it really doesn't go well. And I think the aspect of culture is again something very vital and very critical. It speaks to the attitude, it speaks to the way we think, it speaks to the way that we behave, even when there's no police, even when there are no leaders, even when there are no parents. This aspect of culture makes sure that this behavior, these ways of thinking, are ingrained. I don't know if someone could indicate if they can hear me. I saw something in the chat saying there's no audio. Okay, great. Thank you. Emmanuel Dajagyang, may you please go ahead. May you please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, sorry. You were asking if we could indicate if we hear you, and I was trying to indicate that we could hear you very well. But actually, I had a lot of things I was asking questions on the chat box, but no response yet. But then let me start from something from the last speaker. She talked about something about compromise. And then a quick question just came up. Now, in a conflict situation where you ask someone to compromise, there's an interpretation that compromise could actually mean injustice to somebody. I mean, yes, something rightly belongs to someone, and you come and ask him, hey, calm down, leave this and calm down, compromise. It seems like you are denying the person of what actually belongs to him, and then contributing to reducing the value of peace, because that could actually lead to something else. I mean, that could actually escalate the conflict situation into something else when people start fighting. Other things I wanted to talk about, you know, in the instance where we are trying to make collaborative efforts to make peace again, and then some actors, very key important stakeholders, are actually obstacles to that peace we are trying to make. Instances where actions, somebody asked about this, the actions and inactions of the government statements. Somebody said this around the way, that somehow the government is important, is critical, and then where we find situations where the government itself now is either fueling the reduction in value of peace, or I don't know how to really put this. I want to avoid some terms that may actually instigate some mindsets and arguments, but really a lot of issues about that actually. And then uh, one other thing again, I noticed Milton. Hello, Milton.
Yeah, I can hear you.
I noticed you try to avoid, you've not mentioned anything about religion as a factor. I didn't even see it in the eight wheels and the other indicators. For some people like me now, where I come from Jos. I'm in Jos right now. And then religion is a very key factor. And somehow you seem to have avoided it. I don't know whether you did that intentionally or, you know. So these are issues anyway. The discourse is not something we can actually finish in a day. But while we were talking, these are just some of the issues that came up. I can see that our time is actually up, but for now, let me just leave this. Maybe we'll continue tomorrow, or we'll continue on the Telegram chat group. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. I think that's a good idea. We can pick this up on the Telegram chat group, and then also pick it up tomorrow morning when we resume. Time is indeed up, so I will thank you all for your participation, and excuse those who need to leave to go ahead and leave because our time is up. So thank you for your questions, for your attentiveness, for all the responses you gave. We appreciate them, both negative and positive, because the only way we can improve our work as the IEP is if the only way we can improve our work as the IEP is if we receive this feedback from you, and then we know where our pillars work, where our pillars do not work, and so on and so forth. So thank you for your feedback, and thank you for your participation. We'll pick it up tomorrow. And for those who need to leave, as I said, you can go ahead and leave. And I think I'll just keep speaking for the next 5 minutes or so that we don't disadvantage those who have left, because time is up. But then that was a very, very key interjection. And I think you mentioned two things that are very important, such as aspects or concepts of justice. And I think it's very interesting how you framed it, because when people are being asked to compromise in some conflict situations, everyone has a sense of justice in their own mind or from their own view. If you go and ask, for example, terrorist or extremist organizations, they will also say that they are pursuing their own justice. And yet, on the other hand, when you look at the victims or those who are being assaulted, they're also seeking their own justice. So I think it's important to be aware of those things. And then when you are in the actual negotiation or the actual mediation, or trying to bring in whether it's a peace program or something else, you have this in your mind. Religion is not something we avoid as the IEP. It might not be included explicitly as a pillar, but definitely it has a part to play in all 8 pillars. For example, when you're looking at the respects of the rights of others, I think I mentioned that you have to look at persons of different religions, people of no religion, and every religion as equal people in the same way that you are. That's example for is the respect for the rights of others. In terms of access, equitable distribution of resources, you shouldn't discriminate. And I know there's some communities where these matters are so entrenched and important that people of different faiths can't even go to the same school or work in the same company. And these are things that really need to be addressed in one way or another. I mentioned yesterday that the IEP has done a lot of work in terms of reports. I think in 2013 or 2014, we produced a religions and peace report. On the African continent and globally, we're actually working with a lot of interfaith movements. I think there's the African Council of Religious Leaders, Religions for Peace. We're working with them, and all other, I think there's several organizations in Zambia and Zimbabwe and Botswana and further afield, because we recognize that religions are an important driver of cultures, important drivers of attitude, important in terms of the large numbers of people they have. So they can be harnessed either to drive violence or they can be harnessed to drive peace. And what we would want more than anything is that religions embody this positive peace framework and move forward. As I said, anyone who needs to leave is excused because our time is up and we'll be closing the session now. I know there are so many questions that are unanswered, especially the ones in the chat box. So I will take a look at all of them and then begin with addressing those tomorrow morning as we close out the session. So thank you once again for your participation, and we look forward to our final session tomorrow.